The sound of shovels shoveling dirt over the coffin was the only sound. Beside me, my brother remained motionless, like a stone statue. His eyes were red, but it wasn't just from crying. It was hatred, hurt, a pain that wasn't new. I tried to get closer, tried to reach out, and that's when he looked at me and uttered the words that still echo in my head. Never speak to me again. I froze. I felt a chill creep up my back, as if someone had poured ice down my shirt. I didn't understand right away. I thought it was the grief speaking for him. But no, he was completely sober, composed. After he said that, he turned his back on me, in front of everyone, at our father's funeral. It was like being publicly slapped in the face in the middle of an emotional storm. Everything slowed to a crawl. The family's eyes turned to me. No one said anything, but I felt the silent judgments piercing my skin. My mother, sitting in the chair beside the grave, wept softly. She heard it. Everyone heard it. And no one tried to stop it, because maybe no one knew how, or maybe no one was on my side. It wasn't just grief over the loss of our father. It was another kind of pain, deeper, older. My brother and I hadn't been close for a long time, but that was a definitive cut, as if he'd pulled out an invisible pair of scissors and severed any remaining bond. And all of this at our family's most vulnerable moment. Outwardly, I tried to stand tall, firm, dignified. Inside, I was nothing but shattered glass. I wanted to understand. I needed to understand. But before I could even open my mouth again, he was already gone, crossing the cemetery with heavy steps, as if he were leaving me. Our history, our pain. Share this story to reach further. Subscribe to the channel. Share this video on WhatsApp and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I'll be very happy to read each comment. The road to that day was long. And, looking back now, full of signs I ignored. My brother and I grew up together, of course, in the same house with the same father. But our experiences were completely different. I was the oldest, the favorite according to him. And maybe he was right. I remember the time I got a bike for Christmas, and he was left with only a used soccer ball. I thought it was normal, getting older, our parents said. But he never forgot. He carried it like silent poison. Over time, these small moments became wounds, and I, without realizing it, was helping to press my finger on those wounds without meaning to. As a teenager, he began to withdraw. He didn't talk much, didn't laugh at the same jokes, avoided family gatherings. Our parents thought it was just a phase. So did I. But deep down, he was building a wall, brick by brick, and I didn't bother to ask why. I was too busy living my life. As an adult, he became a stranger with the same last name. We saw each other only at birthdays or obligatory parties. We exchanged few words, and always with a certain unease in the air, as if every conversation were about a minefield about to explode. I thought time healed everything, but time only buries. It doesn't solve. So when he said, "Never speak to me again," it wasn't an explosion out of nowhere. It was the explosion of a buildup, but I only realized it later, after the funeral, after the silence, after the loneliness. The wound had been there for years. I just never had the courage to look closely. After the funeral, I spent days trying to piece together what was left. The pain of losing our father was one thing, but my brother's abandonment, that haunted me like a shadow. Rummaging through the old drawers in my father's office, I found a box of letters, all addressed to me, all written by him. They were letters from my brother, written over the years. Some dated back to when he was still a teenager. Others were more recent, never sent, never delivered. My father kept them all. Perhaps he thought the time would be right one day, but there wasn't time. And now, I was reading an entire past that had been hidden from me. The words were filled with pain, resentment, and confusion. He talked about how invisible he felt, how he thought I had it easy, that our parents' love was mine alone. He spoke of days he'd cry in his room while I went out with friends. Of nights he'd wait for me to come in and say, "Let's talk." But I never did. Reading it was like being punched in the gut. Each paragraph was a memory I never had, a cry for help I never heard. I wondered why he never said anything to me, but I understood. He did, just not with words. He tried, and I failed to hear. I was there but absent, present but blind. I closed the box with trembling hands. A part of me wanted to run to him, to show him that I knew now, that I saw. But another part understood that maybe it was too late, that words wouldn't be enough anymore. that maybe he was tired of trying, and I was too tired to understand when there was still time. In the following days, I waited for a call, any sign, a voicemail, a message, a hint on social media, but nothing. My brother completely disappeared from my life, as if that moment at the funeral had been the final scene of our chapter, and it consumed me inside. I picked up my phone more than 20 times a day. I wrote messages I never sent. Can we talk? I'm sorry for everything. I read the letters, but nothing seemed enough, because I knew he didn't want to hear it. Not yet, maybe never, and that hurt more than any physical absence. It was the absence of hope. My mother tried to help. She called me crying days later, saying the family atmosphere was tense, that my brother was too hurt to talk, that maybe he needed time. But how much time is enough? And when does time become permanent distance? These questions tore at me inside. I went to his house once. I stood across the street for almost an hour. The lights were on. He was there, but I couldn't knock. I was the ghost now, the intruder, and every step I took toward the door felt like a misstep. So I walked back home, carrying more silence. I began to dream about him. Confused dreams, full of unspoken words, interrupted hugs, muffled screams. I woke up sweating, with my heart racing. It was as if my subconscious wanted to resolve what I didn't have the courage to face awake. But the dreams didn't bring peace either, only more questions. I grew up thinking my father was a hero, tough, demanding, but fair. He was demanding, yes. But he was also the one who taught me to drive, who was at my graduations, who said, "I'm proud of you, son," with that half smile he thought hid emotion. But my brother, he saw another man. The letters made it clear, but my mother was the one who confirmed it. She called me to talk a week after the funeral. She said she was tired of secrets, that now that he was gone, things needed to be said. And that's when she told me everything. Things I never imagined. Things that changed everything. My father was strict. I knew that. But with my brother, he was cruel. He demanded perfect grades, compared them to my results, criticized even the way he walked. He said he once threw away a drawing my brother had made when he was little, saying it was a waste of time. I was shocked. I'd never seen anything like that. My mother cried as she told the story. She said she tried to intervene, but my father was inflexible. She said the exemplary sun shield he placed on me was a way of maintaining control. I was the trophy. My brother was the reminder of the frustrations he tried to hide, and that created a rift between us. It was as if my childhood had been a partial lie, or rather, a partial truth. While I received applause, my brother endured scolding, rejection, and silence. And me? I didn't even realize it. I was an accomplice without knowing it. And now, I understood why he never wanted to look me in the eye on the day of the funeral. I only saw him cry once. We were about 10 years old. He came into my room in the middle of the night, his eyes red, and asked if he could sleep there. I said yes. He lay on the floor with a thin blanket. He was quiet, but I heard the sobs. Quiet, embarrassed, and I pretended not to hear. At the time, I thought it was a nightmare, something silly. Today, I understand it was a cry for help. And the only thing he could do was stay silent, crying alone, 2 meters away from me. I never asked what had happened. I never spoke about it afterward, as if it had never happened. This episode came back to me as I leafed through an old photo album. We were always together in the pictures, but now I saw his eyes through a different lens. There was something there, a void the photos couldn't hide, as if he'd known from an early age that he didn't quite belong there. I considered writing a letter back, something he might never read. But I wrote anyway. I told him how much I'd failed, how much I wished I'd done things differently. I asked for forgiveness, without embellishment. I asked for a chance to rebuild, or at least to explain. I sent it to the address he always used. I got no reply. The absence of an answer is also an answer, but still, I had to try. Because I wasn't trying to wash away the guilt. I just wanted him to know that someone was finally truly looking out for him. That even if he no longer wants me around, he wasn't, and never will be, invisible to me. Over time, the tension within the family became impossible to ignore. Gatherings that were once noisy now became silent, filled with averted glances. My brother's name became a ghost. No one spoke, no one asked. Only I, who continued to carry him in my chest every day. My mother tried to act normal, but I could see the guilt and exhaustion in her eyes. My uncles pretended nothing had happened. And my cousins who grew up with us simply took sides or distanced themselves from both. Grief tore our family apart, but it was silence that broke the rest. I began to wonder if it was truly a family, or just a group of people pretending to be connected. My brother's absence weighed heavily on every empty chair. The lack of forgiveness, even more so. I thought time would heal, but time only reveals what has been swept under the rug. And there, everything was thick dust. One night, I tried to spark a conversation over dinner with my mother. I asked if she'd spoken to him. She simply said, "He doesn't want to." The sentence sank like a lead bullet. No further explanation was needed. It was confirmation that in his mind, I was part of the past he needed to forget to live in peace. And maybe, deep down, he was right. Maybe he needed to cut everything off so he could breathe. I just wasn't ready to be completely erased from the life of someone I still called brother, even if only in thought, even if only in memories. A month before Christmas, I decided to try again. I bought a simple but symbolic gift, a book of letters between famous siblings, people who hated each other, loved each other, lost each other, and found each other. I left a short inscription. "If you ever want to talk, I'll be here." And I included my new phone number. I had it delivered directly to his house with no return address, but I knew he'd recognize my handwriting. I spent the next few days in silence, watching my phone as if it were a bomb about to explode. Every notification made me jump, but none of them were from him. His absence was glaring, constant, sharp. A week later, my mother showed up with a plastic bag. She said my brother had sent her gift back. Inside, along with the book, was a photo of us, torn in half. I was holding a bicycle, and he was holding a ball. Half of him was missing, literally. And then, I understood. He wanted to disappear from history. I cried like a child, a shameless, undisguised cry, a cry that mixed anger, sadness, and regret. For the first time, I felt true grief, not just for our father, but for someone who was still alive. My brother was alive, but for me, perhaps, no longer accessible. I kept half of the photo in an envelope, along with the letters, the returned gift, everything that was never said. It was the museum of our failure, but it was also proof that I tried. Maybe too late, maybe wrongly, but I tried. Because losing someone like that is like dying of thirst beside a river you can't cross. I began to wonder, what if I was being proud too? What if, by waiting for him to make the first move, I was reinforcing the same cycle that tore us apart? Pride, when disguised as reason, becomes a prison cell. And I was trapped in the idea that he needed to forgive me, when perhaps I never deserved it. I called a therapist. It was the first time I admitted that it was all destroying me inside, that I couldn't sleep, that the nightmares were back, that even my work was starting to go downhill. She listened to me calmly, as if she understood that sometimes the greatest grief is for someone who still breathes. In the sessions, I began to understand that my role wasn't to hope for a happy ending. It was to accept that there might not be reconciliation, that asking for forgiveness wasn't a strategy to heal the other person, but a step toward healing myself. It hurt, but it was the most liberating truth I'd heard in a long time. I spent days reliving memories, recalling details, re-examining moments with a new lens. I saw childhood scenes with a modern heart, and in all of them, my brother was trying, in his own way, to bond with me, and I, blinded by privilege and distraction, didn't reach out when the time was right. That's when I realized that what hurt me most wasn't his silence now. It was my absence before. I'd been deaf when he'd screamed in silence, and now, maybe he was doing the same. What if it was his way of showing he was hurt too, but too tired to explain himself? It was our mother's birthday. She insisted on bringing the children together, even though she knew the atmosphere would be tense. I said I would. I didn't expect him to go, but he did. He arrived unexpectedly, late in the afternoon, with a box of chocolates and that look in his eyes that reveals nothing but hides everything. The room froze. No one knew what to do. I stood still, my heart racing. He avoided my gaze, greeted the others, and sat in the corner of the room, as if he were there out of obligation. But still, he was there. It was the first time we'd breathed the same air since the funeral. I thought about going to him, but the therapist had told me, do not force reconnections that are still raw, so I took a deep breath and simply respected his presence. I offered him a glass of soda, which he accepted with a curt nod. We didn't exchange words, but there was something there, a tension that wasn't just hurt anymore. Perhaps it was the beginning of something new. Dinner was silent. Our mother tried to liven up the atmosphere, talking about the past, showing photos. In one of them, we were both, little ones, lying on the couch, falling asleep together after playing. I saw him glance at that image. For a second, his face fell, but only for a second. On the way out, he passed me. For a moment, I thought he was going to say something, but he just looked at me and nodded, a barely visible, almost cold greeting, but did not ignore. And that, in that moment, was more than anything. It was a whisper in the silence, small, but real. That night I couldn't sleep. His image, that brief nod, kept replaying in my mind like a movie. It was small, but it said so much. It was the first time he'd looked at me without contempt since the funeral, and it lit a spark that I thought had already died. At 2:43 a.m., I sat in front of my computer. The silence in the house was heavy, and everything I felt seemed to burn inside me. I opened my email. I started writing. I didn't proofread. I didn't edit. I just let the words flow. I talked about the day, my childhood, the letters, the torn photo. I apologized, but more than that, I thanked him for coming. I ended the email with a simple sentence. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. No charge. Just brother. I sent it with a shaking hand. Then I closed my laptop and sat there in the dark, expecting nothing, but with a heart filled with relief that I had finally gotten something out that I'd been carrying for years. The next day, I spent the day trying to feign normalcy. But the truth is, every notification on my phone made my stomach churn, until at 5:12 p.m., a reply arrived. The title was, I read everything. That was it, and my heart stopped. I opened it carefully, like someone opening an old wound in the hope of healing. The text was short. He said he wasn't promising anything, that he was still hurt, that I didn't know if I could forgive myself, but that, for the first time, he felt someone truly heard him. He ended with a, thank you for writing. That's when I realized, sometimes, a sincere step can be the beginning of a bridge. In the days that followed, we no longer exchanged messages, but there were also no more returned gifts or torn photos. It was a different silence now. It wasn't the silence of a break. It was the silence of a pause, as if we were taking a breath before the next step. And that, in itself, was enormous. I began to notice how the world had become lighter. I slept a little better. I ate with less heaviness in my stomach. The pain was still there, of course, but now it came with a little less guilt. I hadn't fixed everything, but I had started. And that was already changing the way I saw myself. My mother noticed the difference. She said my gaze was less hard, that my countenance was returning. And she, who also carried her own guilt, said she hoped one day to see her two sons talking again. I simply replied, I don't know when, but now I believe it's possible. And for the first time, I began to look to the future without so much burden. Not as someone hoping for a miracle, but as someone who understands that broken relationships aren't repaired with pretty words, but with presence, consistency, patience. And I was willing to offer all of that, even if the other side never accepts it. Because deep down, truly loving someone also means knowing how to respect their boundaries. It's understanding that perhaps the best apology isn't a speech, but the humble silence of someone who's there, with open doors, ready to listen when the other person is ready to speak. 2 months passed. I no longer counted the days, but I also didn't forget. Time took charge of transforming pain into longing and guilt into lessons. Until one Sunday morning, I was cleaning the garage, the same one where we played when we were little, when I heard the sound of footsteps on the sidewalk. I looked up, sweaty, clumsy, with a broom in my hand, and there he was, my brother, black t-shirt, worn jeans, tired but lively eyes. He looked straight at me. He didn't look away, and for the first time in a long time, I saw that 10-year-old boy who slept on my bedroom floor. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. The broom fell from my hand and hit the ground, making a dry, almost symbolic thud, as if to say, now, the silence must end. I walked to the gate with my heart in my throat. As I approached, he took a deep breath and said hoarsely, "May I come in?" That broke me. "Sure," I replied, my voice almost broken. I opened the gate slowly, as if I were opening a forgotten book on the shelf. He entered. He crossed the yard, looking around, as if recognizing a house, and at the same time finding it strange. He sat on the old living room sofa and waited. I sat beside him, a meter away, but in that moment, it was as if the chasm between us had finally begun to close. He didn't come to apologize, nor to hear excuses. He came because something inside him also needed to break the cycle. We spent 3 hours together. We talked about everything and nothing. We laughed once. We cried another. And in the end, he said, "I don't know if it can go back to how it was, but maybe we can build something else. Different. Real." And all I could say was, "Yes, it's already more than I dreamed." From that day on, we didn't become best friends overnight. There was still space, care, and open boundaries. But there was also something that had never existed between us: intention. For the first time, we were both willing to walk, even if slowly, toward each other. And that, in itself, was a revolution. We talk every week, sometimes about work, sometimes about movies, sometimes about nothing at all. But every conversation is a new brick in what we're trying to rebuild. A kind of relationship that isn't based on childhood, obligations, or expectations, but on presence, on maturity, on genuinely wanting to be there. My mother says it's like watching two rivers that flowed in opposite directions begin to find a common curve, that it doesn't matter where the separation began. What matters is where it ends. And the truth is, even though time has taken away many opportunities, it has also brought wisdom and patience. Today, sometimes I look at him and still see that silent boy crying in the dark. And whenever that happens, I remember what I promised myself: never again pretend I don't see him. Never again leave him alone in the next room. Never again will I let silence speak for me. The past hurts, yes, but it no longer needs to define our future. The torn photo remains hidden. But now, along with it, we have new photos, new moments, a real fresh start. Fragile, but true. We're in no rush, because understanding another person takes time, and building trust, even more so. But we're here, one step at a time. And sometimes, that's all you need. If you've made it this far, breathing deeply, with your chest tight and your eyes perhaps a little teary, then this story did what it needed to do: remind you that feelings don't expire. Grief doesn't have an expiration date, but it's not eternal either, as long as we have the courage to face what has been hidden for so long. What happened between my brother and me isn't just about a family feud. It's about everything we put off, about all the conversations that never happened because we thought someday would be the right time. It's about the swallowed sentences, the hugs we didn't give, the apologies that got stuck in our throats. It's about what we lose when we think that pride protects, when in fact, it only isolates. Many people grow up thinking that siblings are automatic friends, that blood ties guarantee affection. But no, relationships are built with presence, with time, with effort, and sometimes with pain. The silence between my brother and I wasn't built in a day, but it didn't have to last a lifetime either. And the greatest lesson from all of this is, it's not always possible to fix it, but you can always try. Today, what keeps me at peace isn't knowing that everything has been resolved. No, because real life isn't a movie with a perfect ending. What brings me peace is knowing that I've changed the way I choose to love, that I no longer wait for the perfect moment, that I no longer shy away from difficult conversations, that if someone I love is crying in the next room, I'll open the door, I'll sit on the floor with him, and I'll stay, even if he doesn't say anything. And if you have a brother, a father, a friend, someone in your history who has moved away, who has gone silent, who has lost their way, send a message, write a letter, call, or at least think fondly about what might happen if you took the initiative. Maybe it won't change everything, but maybe it will change something. And sometimes, something is all it takes to start all over again. Now it's up to you. If this story touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with those who need to hear it. Share it with your family, friends, WhatsApp, Facebook, or stories. Maybe someone has been waiting years for a push to take the first step. Be that push. Comment below. Have you or have you ever had a relationship breakup like this? What did this story remind you of? Have you tried asking for forgiveness or starting over? I read every comment, and I can assure you, your story matters too. Subscribe to the channel to receive more real, human, raw stories like this one. Stories that don't pretend to be perfect, but that show that, even in pain, there is a chance for healing. Like the video, because this helps it reach more people who, like you, may be carrying something that should have been alleviated by now. Activate the bell, because the next story may be even stronger, and it may come at a time when you need to hear it most. And tell me in the comments where you're watching or listening from. I want to know how far this story has gone. I want to feel that there are people on the other side, because that's what gives meaning to all of this. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for feeling with me. And most of all, thank you for continuing. Because in the end, that's all we want, right? Continue. But this time, with less weight and more truth. Until the next story.